Hello guys, this is your friend and we are back with a new fanfic. Which is Betrayed Hero, Forbidden Blood, Naruto, Son of Kaguya Part 2. And if you enjoy this fanfic then please press the like button and subscribe to my channel for more fanfic like this. And now let's start the fanfic. Naruto moved Taliah behind him and slid Zetsu in her coat sleeve. Zetsu knew what to do if needed, but he knew Naruto would have it under control. Naruto turned to the goddess and activated his eyes. Really that much of a sore loser that you come and attack me? He says as Artemis's hunters come out of the trees. He doesn't draw his sword just yet. He wanted to try and get Artemis to leave him alone, and going straight to violence wouldn't really help. You disgusting male laid a hand on me, knocked me out and left, she says, drawing her knife. I'll admit I let my rage get control of me, but now I'm in control and you will have to pay, she says, glaring at him. He sighed and looked at Taliah, who was still in the disguise. Stay back with Zetsu, okay? He says, getting a nod from her as Zetsu readies to open a portal to the pocket dimension at a moment's notice. He turned back to Artemis. This is ridiculous, all this over a deer I killed. And don't you have to be attacked by a demigod first before you can retaliate? He asks, making her smirk. Not if this is a hunt, she says with a grin that reminds him of Orochimaru, making the girl smile. He frowns. That's really cheap, he says, shaking his head. What you say we make this official? You swear on the river Styx that only you and I fight. If you win you get the girl and I become your slave, but if I win you swear to never reveal me to Zeus or anyone else and you leave me alone. You don't send hunters to follow me and you don't keep tabs on me, he says, staring her dead in the eyes with the Shinju eyes spinning slowly. She would either swear on it or he'd make her. He wasn't taking chances of anyone knowing of Taliah or taking her away. Artemis smiles at the thought of having the son of chaos as a slave. Fine, I swear on the Styx to abide by your terms, but it is no problem. I am a goddess millennia older than you and much more skilled, she says as she twirls her blade. That was true, but Naruto had the help of a primordial and battle instincts from him as well. Also the abilities of his eyes and jutsus, even the scales. He takes out Tenno and swipes the blade across. Amaterasu, he calls out, creating a circle of black flames around them. This is so no one interferes. These black flames will burn all that it touches and will never be quenched, he says, turning to Taliah, who was outside the ring. Do not worry, I promised to keep you safe and I never break my promises, he says, making her smile. Are you ready to be defeated, boy? She asks in an arrogant tone. He frowns and goes into his cloaked form, staring her dead in the eyes, asking Shinju for help. Yes, let's start. Tsukuyomi, he calls out, drawing her into his illusionary realm. Illusionary realm. He looked around his realm to see it was the old Leaf Village. It reminded him of the days when the villagers used to at least liked him, such as after Pain's invasion. Artemis looked around in shock. Where in the world did you take me? She asks, unfamiliar with these forests. He sighed and stared at her. I have brought you to an illusionary realm of my creation. Years could pass in this realm for only a second to pass in the real world. Now I am not in any way a master at this, but I can at least control this to the basics. Now I can do 3 days at least, he says as he turns to Artemis to find her standing bound by chains. Her eyes widened at the chains. A second ago she was fine, about to gain a new hunter by defeating him, and now she was at his mercy. Now I am not really one to hurt others without reason, but I find that you need to be taken down a peg, he says, pointing Tenno at her. I will teach you to never underestimate someone, no matter if they are below you, as a god can still die to a dagger, he says, plunging to blade through the stomach, burning her with the black flames. She screamed and blacked out, only to open her eyes again to see the same scene minus the wound. You cannot die in this realm. When you do, you just return to normal to repeat this over again. As I said, I am not one to torture, so I will limit it to a day. It's been 5 minutes. Only 23 hours 55 minutes left, he says as he swings his blade to cut her head off. -1 Tsukuyomi day later. He wills the world away to bring him back to the real world. He frowns as Artemis stares at him with fury in her eyes as she goes down to a knee. Strong will, but that is to be expected with you, he says as he swings Tenno down, bursting up the flames as one girl was trying to get through. What did you do to milady? The same girl he met in the forest yells at him as she backs away from the flames. He sighs and looks to her. I have no responsibility to explain myself, ask your mistress when I win, he said as he goes into his cloak mode and summons the truth-seeking orbs. He wasn't being. He was confident and he had to win to keep Talia safe. Artemis sends 2 hunting knives at him, the orbs block them unconsciously and he dashes to her and lands a palm thrust sending her crashing into a tree hard, breaking a few ribs. He ducks under a sloppy kick and knees her thigh, breaking that bone as well. She curses as she gets sent spiraling back. She was being toyed with. She could tell he was holding back and it angered her. Artemis stands shakily and dashes towards him. He weaves around her, slices and cuts her arms multiple times using small blades of wind chakra. He ducks under he and hit her with a hard uppercut sending her flying upwards. You. He sends 2 clones to kick her higher yelling, Zoo, then 3 more punch her higher, Ma, after that 2 more throw her higher, Ki. Finally the original drop kicks her down full force in a very Tsunade-like fashion, Uzumaki barrage. He yells as Artemis rockets down to the ground and causes the ground to shatter and crack. When the smoke dies down, a heavily bleeding Artemis crawls from the hole he sent her in. Her golden blood drips to the ground. She shakily stands, barely able to stand. You bastard, she says, glaring at him with pure hatred. He appears behind her in a burst of speed and starts to sheath his sword. Even after everything, you underestimated me, Artemis, and thus was your downfall. He clicks his blade back into the sheath and a large number of cuts appear on her. Wind style. Swallow cuts, he whispers as Artemis falls to the ground. He extinguishes the flames, letting the hunters rush to Artemis while some point their arrows to him. Stay still and let us redeem milady, the girl with the circlet says. He eases out of cloak mode but keeps the orbs. I won the battle, meaning the Styx oath is in play. She swore none of you would bother me. If you attack me you risk betraying a Styx oath and that doesn't go down well, he says, walking back to Talia. The girl smiles and jumps up and down excited, her blades strapped to her sides in a makeshift manner in a leather holsters he made to help her carry them around. That was crazy. What was that weird thing you did? It was like you two were just standing there for a second before she fell to her knees all exhausted and seemed to be hurt, she says as she sees the hunters glare at him as they take Artemis away, deciding not to risk breaking an oath on the river. Relax, it was just an ability of my eyes, frankly I still can't use it on my own, he says as he had needed Shinju to help him. Luckily his control was much better, so soon he will be learning the powers of his eyes. Good thing he stole all of Tem's scrolls on the Sharingan. He summoned a clone and transformed it into a bird and told it to watch the hunters and to dispel when they left. The clone flew off. His transforming ability had improved as well. As a kid he couldn't do a henge as well as the others, so he put too much chakra into it and discovered something incredibly useful. He could literally transform into other things. Like the windmill shuriken that he turned. If it was a normal henge, how would you explain the Tem throwing him like an actual windmill shuriken? The clone he sent off to gather items in a town came back. The clone had no trouble as he got all the items needed. He sealed away the perishable items and smiled at Talia. She smiled back as they got back to training. Sure, it was all they were doing, but they were having fun and they both needed to hone their skills. Especially him, since being chained in a dungeon for 3 years tends to weaken you a bit, but thankfully his regenerative abilities kept his muscles from getting atrophy. Artemis woke up a few hours after before she woke up. She rubbed her head as her hunters worried over her. Then she remembered what happened. That male had trumped her in battle like it was nothing. That illusionary world, the cloning ability and that sword technique. But the thing that angered her the most was the fact she felt he was holding back extremely. Between that confusing silver fiery appearance and those eyes that would haunt her nightmare, as well as those black orbs that floated around him and apparently according to Zoe could change their form. And those blades that gave off the aura of a god, she had only seen the red sheathed blade, but she could feel the black sheathed one was just as powerful. She knew that Mail had tremendous power and she hated it. She was taken from her thoughts as Zoe, her faithful lieutenant, shook her from her reprieve. "Lady Artemis, are you okay?" she asks, worried. She nods. "I am fine, as you were saying," she asks as she unrolls the bandages from her arm. Zoe nods. "I was saying that we need to find some way to act against that pig-headed Mail. You may have sworn an oath on the river Styx, but there has to be some way around it," she says, making Artemis frown. There was a way around. She'd take the form of her Roman aspect, but that form is unstable since she is around children of the Greek half. Her Roman side would do who knows what with them. She'd have to wait a time where the oath would be null and void, which can happen if someone unknowing of the oath breaks it, so it would have to be a new hunter. And they were nowhere near anyone to possibly recruit. "Tell the hunters we are packing up and moving to a new campground. We are heading north. We leave in 3 days' time, and tell all hunters not to go searching for that man or they will suffer the wrath of Styx," she explains, making Zoe nod and rush out to inform them. She sighed as she got up, still feeling the pain of being crashed into the ground at such a great speed. She hoped she never met that man again. He was too powerful and she did not like that. -2 weeks later. Naruto's clone had informed him that the hunters left after 3 days, so he was able to relax more and remove Talia's henge tag. Over the days he had been learning how to use the Shinju's eyes. They caused him a headache the first couple times, but now at least he could cast illusions with eye contact. Talia also was making good progress with her blades. She even killed a few hellhounds that attacked her some time ago. They weren't much of a challenge, but he told her the same thing he told Artemis. A god can fall to a dagger, so don't get. It seemed to help her as she was catching herself from thinking like that. Zetsu even noticed it, as did Shinju, though he still wanted another week or so before doing anything with giving her chakra. He focused mostly on his eyes, but clones were definitely a godsend for training, as he now had a lot of elemental jutsus under his belt, ranging from the basic elements to even some for Mokuden, lava and steam. He still had his Rasengan, but he only used them when he truly wanted to obliterate something. He knew Talia should be going to school, but having the knowledge of a primordial inside him helps him to be a good teacher for her. Even if she complained every moment of it like he did when he was her age. Their cash problem was easily solved, as his grandmother had oddly packed in Jiraiya's books away in the scroll. They had a note saying, "Sell," on them, so that's exactly what he did. He sent a clone hanged as Jiraiya and got the books published and something called a credit card that the money was put on. Talia was fairly reserved, but she knew she could always talk to him about anything. She was opening up to him nicely. She even dragged him along to get girl stuff that he was frankly afraid to ask about. She also brought up her past of how her mother had broken down and how her brother got kidnapped. She cried in his arms for 15 minutes that day. He truly liked the young girl. Sure, she was brash at times and quick-tempered, but so was he when he was her age. And she was slowly getting out of it, but was still like that at most times. After all, someone can't change in a short period of 2 weeks. He sighed as he sat training in drawing nature chakra with more ease. Talia was bathing in the creek behind him as he and Zetsu stood guard and swore on Styx not to peek. He was 20, nearly 21. For Cammy's sake he wasn't going to peek on a 12-year-old girl. He was relaxing when he heard her return wearing new clothes, but kept the lion pelt that was in a constant golden trench coat form. He looked to her and smiled as they walked back. He sighed. "Talia, are you tired of camping?" he asks her as he starts on cooking dinner. Talia thinks for a second. "Sure, but monsters would always find us and we'd have to get away if we tried living in a town," she says with a frown. He nods. "Yes, monsters will find us, but who says we need to run?" With my skills of silent killing and your eventual use of chakra, we can survive peacefully for some time before big monsters come and start destroying stuff. And money isn't a problem, as the last time I sent a clone into town to check my card's balance, it came up with a number with 2 commas, he says, making Talia's jaw drop. She thinks a second before smiling. I would love a place, but I think we'd somewhere with a big backyard to train, she says, excited to finally have a house again. He chuckles. I'll send some clones out to find houses for sale near here, he says, making her excited. She bounces in excitement and nods. Yes, one with a nice big room for me, she says with a massive smile. We can leave tomorrow for the road, so you have to go to bed early, he says, making her pout slightly but nod as dinner was served. Next day, Naruto had changed his outfit to be more modern. It consisted of dark jeans and an orange button-up with a black trench coat so Zetsu could stay in his sleeve. He kept his sandals, of course. His swords were sealed inside a storage seal on his left wrist for easy access. He had the motorcycle he bought some time ago unsealed and everything sealed up in scrolls in the side bags. The motorcycle was a Harley Davidson colored in black with a sidecar. He made sure to get a helmet for Talia and him. She was sitting excitedly in the sidecar. Relax, Talia, we will be heading off shortly. The clones found a nice house with a big backyard, he says, making her bounce more. Talia nods and smiles. I know, but I'm getting my own room to decorate and have more clothes and somewhat normal life, she says, smiling happily. He ruffles her hair playfully, which made her swat away his arm. He hands her the helmet. Put that on and we can get going, he says, making her fasten it quickly. He starts the bike and starts driving out of the forest carefully before he gets on the road. Driving was easy, especially when he could manipulate the mist to broadcast his illusions to some extent. He even taught Talia to manipulate the mist to a lesser extent. A few hours later they arrive at the house he set up to buy. With the help of clones during the night and the internet, he was able to buy it very quickly. The bubbly real estate agent dropped off the keys and showed them the house. It was a very nice looking 1-story house, 3-bedroom house. Large backyard and even a basement. He knew this wouldn't last long, but he would try his best to keep her happy with a somewhat normal life for as long as he could. She deserved this much after everything she's gone through. Talia ran directly for the main bedroom, but he booted her out. He would have to take her shopping later. He was more focused on putting up a barrier. He slammed the crescent mark down on the ground, covering the ground in a large sealing array that grew the more chakra he pumped into the mark. That seal will notify him if someone entered the house with ill intent. He sent a clone to set a protective barrier around the border. He wasn't taking any risks. Years of being a shinobi taught him to stay vigilant. He walked over to see Talia smiling at her room. I can decorate it however I want, right? She asks with a smile. He nods and ruffles her hair. Of course, we can go right now if you want. I'll leave a clone to be here to sign for the furniture and everything, he says, making her smile more. How did you get all this done in a night? She asks, somewhat confused. He chuckles. Well, a mixture of many clones and a lot of money helps, he says as they leave the house. They drove and got a lot of black and blue paint as well as a lot of clothes and electronics, as his barrier can keep her demigod scent from being broadcasted. No one noticed the fact they were driving a motorcycle and buying enough stuff to overfill a minivan. The mist is a powerful thing. They return to the house to see clones setting up everything, with Zetsu controlling one of the clones. He had it hang to look like a normal version of white Zetsu. Luckily he was able to parasite off it without the half-black thing. Good to see you two are back. We have a guest, he says, pointing to the 8-year-old girl sitting by the fireplace. He looks to Zetsu and frowns. How did she get in? He asks as Talia shuffles behind him. The girl was wearing a cream dress with a hood, her cinnamon hair cut short and her eyes a fiery color, changing every few seconds as if they were flickering flames, but they had a kind home-like sense to them. Zetsu shrugs his shoulders. Moments after I lit the fire she appeared. She has no ill intentions in the very slightest, so she is fine, he says, leaving the room. Naruto turns to the woman, Hestia. He asks, confused, how and why this goddess was here. The young-looking goddess smiles at him and Talia. You have a beautiful home here, she says with a smile. Such a classic house and perfect for the two of you, she says as she waves her hand to conjure cookies and hot chocolate. Why are you here? He asks as Talia hides more behind him. Why is it that when he is trying to hide from every god or goddess they end up finding him? First Demeter, then Hermes, and worst of all Artemis. At least Demeter and Hermes were helpful, Artemis was an annoyance. Hopefully Hestia was as kind as she was in the legends. Hestia smiles and looks towards Talia. Relax, I mean you all no harm, as Hermes told me everything. I think what you are doing is sweet, Naruto, she says with a smile. I also chimed in at the meeting to try and save Talia. My siblings can be quite heartless, she says with a frown. Naruto turns to Talia. Go stay with Zetsu, tell him it's all okay, but I just want to make sure, he says, getting a nod as Talia rushes out of the room. Talia always acted afraid around any god or goddess. He thinks it's because she's afraid they will return her to the tree. Even if she was only in it for a couple hours, it terrified her. She had described it as pure darkness. She couldn't make her hear any sound and she felt float. She still had nightmares of it occasionally. Once Talia left the room, he went over and sat across from Hestia. So you really mean Talia no harm, cause I already had to fight one goddess to protect her. I don't want to do another, as I can feel you are leagues stronger than Artemis, he says with a frown. Hestia nods and smiles, handing him a cup of hot chocolate. I apologize for my niece, she is too arrogant for her own good. I am sorry you had to fight her and put young Talia through all this, she says, taking a sip of hot chocolate. Though from the feel of this house you truly care for the child, she flashes him a warm smile. He nods and takes a sip. That girl has gone through enough in her asshole if a father doesn't make it any better, he says, looking to the goddess. So what do we owe the visit, Hestia? He asks as the goddess puts down her glass of hot chocolate. He turned to see Talia ordering around some clones as they carried her supplies to her room. He chuckled slightly before turning to the goddess again. I came here to visit your new household and maybe help you out and see this cute new family you formed, she says, smiling at him. I can feel she considers you like a father and looks up to you, she says, handing him a cookie. He takes a bite and frowns. Well, I'm glad you are here to help. Strangely enough, you are the third godly being to help me, he says, making her chuckle. He raised an eyebrow as she changed from her 8-year-old form to that of one that looked around his age. She was a few inches shorter than him and her short hair now reached the middle of her back. Her figure couldn't be seen under her cream dress, but she gave off the aura of being very lovely figure. She stood up and dusted her dress off for crumbs. Please do excuse this form, as I am fonder of my younger form, but I need this form to bless others, she says, straightening her dress. He smiled. Well, I think you look lovely, Hestia, he says, getting a light blush from the goddess. The goddess felt nervous as she adjusted her dress and hood. She had never been complimented like this. Never with someone with no ill intentions behind their words. The main reason she stayed in her younger form was because Hera and Aphrodite had been very unkind to her because she unknowingly brought the attention of males, and she had once almost been raped at an Olympian party because of it. Luckily, a donkey had awoken her and protected her. Why thank you, she says, brushing her bangs to cover her blush. She clears her throat. So, she says as she places 2 fingers on his forehead, I, Hestia, the goddess of hearth and home, bless you to use powers of my domain, she says, and then proceeds to take a step back. Naruto rubs his forehead and looks to the goddess. I am honored to be blessed by you, Hestia, he says, flashing her a kind smile. May I know what your blessing entails? Hestia blushes once again and turns around. Well, I'm glad you are honored. I have never blessed anyone before, she says in an embarrassed tone. You will be able to conjure food and clothes as well as Greek fire, she says, turning back around once her blush died down. Naruto nods and stands up. if I am the first one you bless, then I am even more thankful for the honor, he said, speaking the truth. From the info his grandmother had given him, Hestia was very reserved yet unbelievably kind. She had no evil in her being. It saddened him that a goddess like this was taken from the council. The only voice of reason had disappeared from it. I will do my best to not abuse your blessing. Also feel free to visit whenever, he says, smiling again. Hestia shifts back to her younger form, blushing again, and nods. I would like that. The only thing I ask is for you to offer some food each time to the gods and goddesses that voted to save Talia, she says, making the dishes disappear. Naruto nods and stands up. The least I can do. Also, you being here will maybe get Talia to stop being so nervous around the gods and goddess. I think she just fears returning to a tree, he says as he gains memories from a clone that Talia dispelled on accident when they got in a paint fight. He chuckled and smiled at Hestia. Hestia nods. I will try and visit regularly as my Olympian duties do not require much, she says as she heads to the fire and strokes it. Keep her safe, Naruto. She will need a strong family to survive this harsh world as a demigod, she says before vanishing from his house. He nods. He was dead set to keep her safe, as much as he could, and prepare her for the harsh world. He knew she would have to leave him eventually, as she was a possible child of prophecy and needed to eventually be a part of that backwards camp. He just hoped he could train her enough before that came to be. -3 months later. Naruto smiled as he overwatched Talia's training inside his Kamui dimension. Over the 3 months he could at least draw her in here and return to the house. It made great training grounds since the realm couldn't be destroyed or damaged. He also got the hang of Amaterasu and Kamui over the months. Plus a small amount of Rinnegan abilities, but found he could use the abilities easier with their respective blades drawn. Yamato helped the Rinnegan and Tenno helped the Sharingan. Just as his grandmother had told him. When he gave Talia chakra, he found something interesting with her. She had 2 affinities, lightning and wind. That wasn't the surprising part since she was a child of Zeus. She was a lightning powerhouse and he theorized she'd be able to fire off Kirins like nothing. But the surprising part is she had 2 Kekai Genkai, storm and swift release. By mixing lightning and wind at different ratios, she could assess the both of them. Wind plus and lightning equals swift. Lightning plus and wind equals storm. He had been training her in numerous jutsus of her elements, and with Shinju's help he wrote down jutsus for her 2 releases. He was even teaching her the Rasengan as he trusted her with it. But the most surprising thing had happened around 2 months ago, about a month or so after Hestia's first visit. Flashback. Naruto was training Talia in the backyard. Hestia was cooking in the kitchen. Sure, she could make food instantly, but for some reason she liked to cook and especially liked to do it for him and Talia. Training was going as normal until a massive roar filled the clearing as something massive burst through the trees. He quickly burst in front of Talia and moved her behind him as a massive beast stared down at them. It stood on all 4s with scaly gray skin. It had a long tail at its end and 5 massive heads with long snake-like necks. It was the Hydra. Talia head inside. This is not a request, he says in his stern voice. Go stay with Hestia, I won't let this thing get near the house. She frowned but saw the look in his eyes, they were dead serious. Like he always was whenever he was worried about her getting hurt. Fine, but be careful, I don't want anything to happen to you. Dad, she says, blushing darkly as she leaves a shocked Naruto behind. Did she just call me dad? He asks Shinju to hear him chuckle in response. Yes she did, kid, seems like I'm a great-grandfather now, he says, making Naruto grumble. We'll figure this out later, we need to kill this thing, he says, looking to the beast that finally noticed him. We can't cut its heads off cause 2 will take its place. Fire is the weakness, he thinks with a smile. Great opportunity to test out a Greek fire jutsu, he says as he dodges the lunges from the heads, keeping them at bay with his truth-seeking orbs. Over the month he found out his normal fire could be changed to Greek fire, a powerful green flames. He ran his hands through the hand signs and took a deep breath as a clone severed all their heads using wind style, swallow cuts. The second the heads were cut he called out, fire style, Greek desolation. Sending out a massive burst of green flames to cauterize the wounds, killing the beast in a shower of golden dust leaving a scaly hide behind and 2 heads. He groaned as he put out the flames left on the ground and sealed up the hide and threw the heads in the fire and sacrificed them to Hestia. He walked his way back to the house to see Talia hiding behind a 25-year-old looking Hestia. He chuckled as she smiled at him. "Talia, are you okay there?" He asks, making her nod as she still hid behind Hestia. "You know I don't mind you calling me Dad, I actually really like it. Especially since I've considered you a daughter shortly after I saved you," he says, patting the punk girl's head. Talia looks up to him nervously and nods as Hestia smiles kindly at the two. "Well, clean up and get ready for lunch," she says, making Talia hug him quickly before running off fast to get away from the embarrassing moment. Hestia smiled warmly at him. "Thank you for the sacrifice and thank you for being there for her," she says, rubbing his arm before walking away. He smiled. "I promised I'd be here for her. Being a father figure to her like she deserves is great for her," he says as he follows Hestia. Flashback end. Ever since she called him Dad, she had been very nervous and shy at times. She still called him Dad at times, but most of the time when they were alone. She did it around Hestia, but very quietly, as if she didn't want her to hear. Also, Hestia had been around nearly every day. It was nice having her around. She was someone nice to talk to and a sweet lady. She also helped Talia with girl talk that he was nervous to do. Especially when she got her first period and he didn't know one thing about it. They had kicked him out of the academy when they were learning about reproduction stuff for some reason or another. He knew about the male side from the pervy sage, but even then he didn't truly trust those words. He was thankful to Hestia for her help that day. He cleared his throat. "That should be enough for one day, Talia." He calls out, getting the girl's attention. She frowns. "Come on. I can keep going," she yells back, waving her swords, charging them with lightning that happened unconsciously when she was angry. He chuckled and walked over to her, stepping on the floating platforms that riddled his realm. "Relax. You have been working hard all day. You need to rest and you still need to practice chakra control and the steps to the Rasengan," he says, making her grumble but sheath her blades. The sheaths were handmade by him. They were the first things he created using creation of all things. They were like a briefcase sort of sheath. They opened up on a hinge and clasp. She would lay the blades in and clasp them close. They even had a quick release switch that would open them in a second for easy access. "Fine, but you need to help me with the second step of it," she says with a pout. "You said I had to do it all, but you got a hint when you learned it," she says as they walk through the portal he made. He chuckles. "Well, I used a clone, but you don't have the same problem I had. You are just trying to make it rotate fast and powerful. Maybe try multiple directions," he says as he tosses her a rubber ball. She groaned. "Why is this so difficult? I had no trouble with the Chidori and the Reikiri even if you won't let me use the second one without you around, but that's not the problem. If I had no problem with techniques that powerful, why is this one giving me so much trouble?" She yells in frustration. He chuckles and ruffles her hair. "You have an insane affinity to wind and mostly lightning, so those techniques were nothing to you. The Rasengan, on the other hand, is no element. It is pure chakra manipulation and pure shape manipulation. That is much more difficult," he explains, making her grumble. "Fine, but this is really annoying," she says as she runs off to her room. She always went there to think if she was having trouble. Her room was painted with black walls and gray dresser and bed, and the walls were covered with band posters. She had a computer, TV and MP3 player, as since the barrier stopped them from broadcasting her demigod scent. The Hydra had just accidentally wandered upon them. They occasionally got wandering monsters, mostly just Stymphalian birds and hellhounds, nothing else big. He chuckled as he went to rest in the living room. He conjured up some food and drink just in time for Hestia to appear in her aged form. "Hello there, how has the training been?" she asks as she accepts a cup of tea. "I hope you aren't pushing her too much, she is just a child after all." She takes a sip of her tea and smiles. Naruto nods and drinks his tea. "I'm not pushing her too far. If anything, she is pushing herself too far," he says, making the goddess chuckle before she frowns and puts down her glass. He notices it and puts his down as well, looking over to her. "What is wrong, Hestia?" he asks, confused. She looks to him and has a nervous look on her face. "Hera found out I have been in my elder form and that I have a champion, and she wishes to meet said champion and test him," she says with a frown. "Wait, I'm your champion?" he asks, unknown to the fact. Hestia blushes a bit and nods. "I'm sorry, when I blessed you I sort of made you my champion. I'm sorry, I should have told you." "And I," she says as she was interrupted by a finger on her lips. She looks up to see Naruto smiling kindly at her. "It is fine, I don't mind being your champion as you are the most level-headed Olympian. I figure Hera will want me to fight someone," he asks, getting a nod from her. He sighs and summons a clone for Zetsu to possess. "Protect Talia and tell her where I am and that I will be safe." "Okay," he says, getting a nod from the possessed clone. "Be safe, brother," Zetsu says as he tossed Naruto the scroll that contained everything. He nods. "Of course, brother," he says back as Zetsu leaves. He turns and smiles to Hestia. "Ready whenever you are, Hestia," he says with a warm smile, making her blush again. She nods. "Yes, let's go," she says as they flash away. Olympus. Naruto stared in interest at his surroundings. The sky was a glowing dark blue with dark gray clouds brightened up from arching lightning between them. He saw Greek architecture all around with columns and arches. He looked around until his eyes landed on 12 large thrones with equally as large beings on them. The Olympians. He noticed Demeter and Hermes, who gave him small smiles, while Artemis and Zeus glared at him heavily. Artemis seemed still healing from her posture and Zeus just plain hated him. "He is your champion, sister?" Hera asks, looking at him, her bronze hair billowing over her shoulders, draping over her golden toga. Her eyes looking at him as if judging him. "Son of Chaos is a powerful champion, how did you get him as your champion?" "He hides his presence far too well for any of us to find him," she says, frowning. Naruto steps forward. "She found me while I was wandering around as I refused to stay in that backwards camp. She blessed me so I could stay fed even though I can hunt quite easily," he says as Zeus glares at him. "How dare you speak badly of the camp?" he says in anger. "First this boy bad-mouths him and now the camp he set up for millennia." Naruto looks to them and scoffs. "You focus too much on training them as solo acts when they should work as cells. They stood around watching Talia and her group struggle and I had to jump in and save them. Not to mention they aren't allowed to leave without permission or a quest, they never see or fight real monsters and that leads to many dying when they do eventually go on a quest," he said, making Athena nod. He speaks solid logic. "In groups our kids would be stronger and if they had experience fighting monsters under the watch of seasoned warriors it would bring down the risk of quests considerably," she says, making Zeus grumble but sit back down. Aphrodite smiles and waves at him. "Why don't I borrow you from Hestia? Since she has a vow of chastity you should get some fun," she says to him, making Ares glare at him and Hephaestus glare at her. He shook his head. "No, I am not one to do that with someone I just met and someone I don't love," he explains as he pinches the bridge of his nose. Was this how the Tem felt when Sakura was all pushy for him? Hera cleared her throat. "If we can get back to what we called him here for, I would like to ask him a question," Hera says as Aphrodite backs off from him, making Hestia happy. "We called the Son of Chaos here as we feel him being Hestia's champion is too dangerous as she is not an Olympian," she says, making Naruto scoff. "She is one of the most level-headed goddess out there. No offense, Lady Demeter," he says, getting a kind smile and nod from said goddess, "and after how you did Zeus's punishment I don't think I want to be any of your champions," he says, glaring down Zeus. You dare question my judgment? He yells, making Naruto glare heavily at him. Yes, I dare. You decide to throw your punishment onto a scared little girl. A girl who had been running and surviving for years just to finally end up at her safe haven to have her safety stolen from her. He yells, making the Shinju eyes spin. You trapped her in who knows what kind of hellish limbo. To be alone for years until she somehow gets saved by demigods that have no idea what to do. Tell me, O God of judgment. Is that fair? He yells, bursting into his cloak mode. Zeus glares him down before Poseidon yells, enough. Poseidon looks to Zeus. He is right, you pushed your punishment into your own daughter Zeus, and since the judgment has been passed we can't fix it. All we can hope for is that we did not screw over our child of prophecy, he says, making Zeus slump in his seat, glaring at Naruto. Poseidon looks at him. You can relax now, son. Zeus won't do anything, he says, getting Naruto out of his cloak mode but keeps the eyes active. And who could blame him for being cautious around his paranoid brother? Now all we want to do is evaluate you, a spar against Ares. He won't go overboard or anything, we just want to see how much strength you do have, he says, getting a sigh from Naruto. I have no wish to just flaunt my power in a spar, I only fight to protect others, and if you want proof of how strong I am. He opens a portal, connecting to Zetsu, asking for the pelt for a second. Here, the pelt of the Nemean lioness, he says, showing it to all. I killed it by making it explode from the inside out with a seed, he says as he tosses it back through the portal. Ares is drooling. Made it explode with a seed, how does that work? He asks, curious to see if he could do the same with grenades. Naruto sighs and stomps his foot, sending what little nature energy he had on him into the ground. He found with nature energy when corded through the ground you could use Mokuten without hand signs. Wood style. Springtime ensnarement, he calls out, catching a seed in his hand. I threw this in its mouth, sent chakra to it and grew a tree from the inside out, he says, tossing the seed over his shoulder, making it land in the garden and a massive cherry blossom bloom from it. Apollo lets out a whistle. Amazing, control over nature just like Demeter. Did you know of that? He asks the goddess. She nods. Yes, I did, and I allow him to grow whatever he wants. He does no harm in it, so why not? She says with a shrug. What else can you do? Athena asks with a glint in her eyes. Naruto remembered that same glint from her daughter Annabeth. He shakes his head. I will not go around explaining all my skills. I did it this one time to show you all I can survive on my own. Now can I go, as I have much to do, he says, opening a portal. No one stops him or says anything, so he steps through and closes it behind him. Zeus turns to Hestia. Sister, you have a dangerous champion. If I feel you are trying anything, I will smite you and him. Consequences be damned, he says, glaring at her only to get an ice-cold glare from his normally warm sister. This causes him to flinch. Brother, you need to stop being so paranoid. I only asked him to be my champion so I could keep him from starving in the wild. No ulterior motives that you imagine so much, she says before leaving to tend to the hearth. Zeus grumbles and slumps in his chair. He really hated that kid. Naruto. The second he got home he was hugged, tackled by Talia. Dad, are you okay? Did they threaten you or anything? She asks, worried. He chuckles and pets her head. The asshole threatened me, but I put him in his place with words. The queen was a bit pretentious but seemed fine. Athena was too curious and Ares was itching for a fight, but I got out before any could start. I promised I'd keep myself safe to look after you, and I always keep my promises, he says as he hugs her, making her smile and hug her father back. He may not be my father by blood, but he has done more than any of my parents ever could, she thinks as she backs away from the hug. Oh, I finished the second step, she says, excited to learn the next step. He smiles and stands up as Talia had knocked him down. Oh really? Great job, he says as he gets a nod of assurance from Zetsu. Now you just need to do both steps at the same time, he says, picking up a spare rubber ball and holding it up. Nothing's happening, she says with a frown. The ball wasn't rumbling or even twitching. He smiles and pops the balloon with a needle to reveal a perfect Rasengan under the balloon. Now you must combine power and rotation and not pop the balloon. Trust me, I know it seems easy, but it is the most difficult step, he says, handing her a bucket of rubber balloons. You're gonna need them, he says with a smirk as she darts off in excitement to train. Don't train too long, he yells just as she closes her door. He turned to Zetsu and smiled. So nothing interesting happened while I was away? He asked as Zetsu hid in his trench coat sleeve. Nothing beside her training and worrying about you at the same time, he says with a chuckle. You really like being a father for the girl, don't you? He asks as he had seen his brother care for the girl a lot since he had saved her. Naruto nods. Of course, she reminds me of a younger version of myself minus the villagers and whatnot, he says, waving it off. She deserves some father figure since the asshole won't provide, he says, getting a chuckle from Zetsu. Well, I better get started on dinner. And when I say, I mean my clones, he says, summoning clones to get to work. He needed to study on something important, his eyes could wait. He needed this technique should Talia ever get taken away or if she ever decides to go back to camp. He unsealed the scroll he was looking for from the main scroll and opened it up. The first word said it all. Introductions to learning of the Hiraishin, are better known as the Flying Thunder God. He knew this was going to take some time to learn. Naruto frowned as he fiddled with Hermes' business card. He needed some kunai made so he could start testing his understanding of the Hiraishin. According to Shinju, his father got the idea from watching his mother flash away to the godly realm. But the Hiraishin was different as it was much faster and easier as well as less dangerous to demigods and mortals. The only downside was the need for a marker to warp to. With the help of Shinju he had it down in theory, but theory and real-life application were two completely different things. He had spent the majority of 2 weeks reading through space-time ninjutsu theories that without Shinju it would have taken much longer to understand. He pulled out his cell phone and walked out to the backyard. Stay inside Talia and continue with the third step. I need to place an order with Hermes, he says, getting an absent-minded nod from the punk girl as she was too focused on the Rasengan. He chuckled and dialed the number. He heard a voice on the other side. Yo, what you need? He heard Hermes say, come here, I need you to get Hephaestus to maybe build me something or at least get me some celestial bronze so I can make them on my own, he says as the phone hangs up on Hermes' end. Seconds later a flash fills the clearing. He looked to see Hermes standing atop a huge stack of big bronze cubes. This good enough? I had a feeling you'd call for material or something like this, he says, jumping down from it. Good luck using it as I have no idea on how to do it and I doubt Hephaestus would help as he doesn't interact with people too well, he says, waving him off. Call again if you need help, he says before flashing away again. Naruto sighs and seals it all away. At least it went easy and quick. Seems like Hermes pulled through with what he promised last time. He walks back in to see Talia still absorbed in her third step. He chuckled and ruffled her hair, getting a slap on his hand out of reflex for her. I'm going to be in the basement. Zetsu will be watching over the house, okay? He says to her, getting another nod. He shook his head and set up a clone for Zetsu to use and went down to the basement and removed the illusion he kept over it, revealing a huge forge and training grounds. After the run-in with the Hydra, he trained her down here using spatial seals to make it 25 times larger than it originally was. His crescent mark worked wonders. He unsealed the materials and reread up on how to craft things. He needed the kunai to be celestial bronze with some chakra conductive steel, which he had more than enough of. He found he couldn't create celestial bronze with the creation of all things as the metal was very specific. He sighed as he created clones and got into the right gear to start forging. Several hours later, he had finally got done using all the materials to make a crap load of Hiraishin kunais and proceeded to mark them all as his crescent mark could create the Hiraishin seal, which he promptly set on the house, and a leather-spiked wristband for Talia to have at all times. He would start testing tomorrow as he was exhausted and needed a shower. He walked up the stairs and went to his room to notice a passed-out Talia with a rubber ball still in her hand. Poor girl tired herself out, he thought as he picked her up bridal carry and went to her room. He laid her down on her bed and pulled a blanket over her only for her to grab his hand in her sleeping state. "Love you, Daddy," she says clearly asleep from the mumble. He smiles kindly and places a small kiss on her forehead. "Love you too, Talia," he says as she smiles and lets go, still asleep. He chuckles as he turns to leave to see her desk covered in notes. He could see one named, "Birthday Gifts for Dad." That one brought a massive smile to his face. He forgot it was getting close to his birthday, he'd be turning 21 in a few months. He didn't look at the list as he didn't want to ruin the surprise or anything. He carefully left the room and closed the door behind him to see a smiling Zetsu clone before him. "That girl definitely doesn't give up," he says, making Naruto sigh. He would have to watch over her to make sure she doesn't do the same again. "I'll have to watch her more as she trains so she doesn't overdo it anymore. Go to bed or whatever you do at night," he said to Zetsu as he goes to his room to shower. Next day, Talia had woken up early and went back to work, which woke him up. All the loud pops were not good to sleep through. He got up to see Talia still struggling with the third step. "Hey, what did I tell you about training?" he says, rubbing the sleep from his eyes. She looks at him sheepishly. "As long as you don't wake me and don't make yourself get chakra exhaustion, I'm good," she says, worried. Naruto sighs and bops her on the head. "You woke me up and you made yourself pass out yesterday, so take it easy today," he says with a flat tone. She rubs her head. "Fine, Dad, I'll take it easy," she says, sitting down at the table, waiting for breakfast. He summons food for them and sits down. He tosses her the leather bracelet. "Wear that at all times just as you do with the Nemean pelt. If what I am training to do today goes correctly, I'll be able to get to you in a flash," he says as he starts eating. Talia looks confused but puts it on, smiling at the bracelet. "Thanks, Dad," she says as she starts eating. Naruto smiles. "Welcome, Talia. Now remember to be careful training," he says, getting a nod from her as they continue their meal. Talia heads down to the basement with Zetsu as he was very cautious since gods or goddesses could still get in here. He sighs and heads outside, placing a marker near the door as he sits on the far side of the backyard. "Now remember, kid, each marker has a mixture of your chakra and small nature chakra. Since you put it there, it will only work as a marker for you to warp to. You need to feel the marker and pull yourself to it," Shinju says, trying to explain it as simply as he can. "I understand all that, Shinju, but actually doing that is more difficult. I can feel the marker and its pull, but I'm still working on going to it," he says as he tries to go to it but gets nowhere. "Maybe go into sage mode to get a better sense of it, and if that doesn't work, put some of my chakra into it to strengthen it," Shinju offers his help. Naruto sighs and sits in his meditative pose and eases into sage mode. First thing he noticed was the string of nature chakra connected to him and the marker, but the weird thing was it wasn't his. It was as if the stagnant nature chakra in the air connect him to the marker and kept the marker powered. If he could strengthen this pathway, it might make warping much easier. He went over to the marker and sent some of Shinju's chakra into it and immediately felt the pull the second he placed it down. Curious to see if he could pull it off, he went back to the edge of the backyard and took a deep breath and went with the pull, resulting in an orange flash. He smiled as he picked up the marker, twirling it around his finger. "Perfect, that was much easier," he said as Shinju chimed in. "Kid, that is because your father struggled with the theory for all those years. You had it in front of you, and not to mention my help as well as your nature energy and access to my energy. It took you 2 weeks to understand it all, whereas your father took 5 years, he explains, getting a nod of acceptance from Naruto. "Well, thanks, Shinju, this will help me much more," he says as he heads inside to the basement. He saw Talia cursing as she sat down. She saw him and frowned. "Dad, I can't do it," she says, getting upset. She wanted to make her dad proud by mastering his signature jutsu quickly but couldn't do the final step. He chuckled and sat down, grabbing her hand with the wristband, putting Shinju's chakra into it. Look Talia, it took my dad nearly 3 years to even make it. My godfather took many months, and so did my father's student. The only reason it took a week for me to do it was because I had my clones help me. You need to be patient and try and balance the ratio of power and rotation so it doesn't get out of hand, he says, hugging her kindly. She nods and wipes her tears. Thanks Dad. Did you finish what you were planning to do? She asks as she picks up another ball. He smiles and nods. Yup, now I can always return to you as long as you have that bracelet on, he says, confusing her. How does that work? She asks as she tries out a ratio for power and rotation speed. He smiles and walks to the opposite side of the room and looks to her. Hold up your bracelet, he says, getting her to do it. Now don't freak out, as my dad designed this technique, he says as he disappears in an orange flash and ends up next to Talia, shocking her greatly. It is called the Hiraishin and it's a space-time ninjutsu like my Kamui, he says, getting a nod of understanding from her. Getting more and more shocking every time you show me something new, Dad, she says, chuckling, then frowning as the ball burst. Just you wait. Till I figure out my eyes you'll be even more shocked, he says as sits down to watch over her, hoping he can keep these peaceful times with his daughter. -2 months later. It had been relatively peaceful for the last 2 months. A hellhound here, a cyclops there, nothing too bad. Talia had finally perfected the Rasengan after training in the 3rd step for another week or so. She then focused on lightning and wind jutsus as they were incredibly easy for her. Naruto focused on mastering the Hiraishin and aspects of his eyes among other elemental jutsus. It went nicely, but today he decided was a relaxation day as it was his birthday. A week or so ago Talia asked for the credit card and Zetsu so she could go to town. He knew what was going on as he saw the little list on her desk, didn't read it though, just the title, so he asked if her could come. She used her girl problems as an excuse for him to stay home. She always did that when she wanted something private. He was told by Talia and strangely enough Hestia to stay in his room until they call for him. Even Zetsu was out of the room. He suspected he went off to heaven like his did at the end of every month to fill in mom of how he had been doing. He sighed as he heard them call for him. He had never been the birthday type. Hell, the only time he really celebrated it was with his dad at the end of the war, and that wasn't really anything. The other time had been with Iruka and Gigi, and that was just ramen. Which Shinju wouldn't let him summon mountains of it, claiming he needed a balanced diet, but he digressed. He walked out of his room and heard, surprise. He saw Hestia, Talia, Zetsu, his mom, and his grandma all together smiling at him. Mom and grandma, what are you doing here? He asks, looking to Hestia. She waved it off. They explained everything, and I love that you are here to help. Maybe you will get my stubborn family to get along, she says with a kind smile. He sighs in relief as his mother hugs him tightly. Happy birthday, Sochi. I'm sorry for missing all your other ones, she says in a sad tone. Naruto frowns and hugs his mother back. You are here now, it is all that matters. Now none of this sad stuff, we are here for a party, he says, smiling at Talia. Mom and Grandma, I would like to introduce you two to Talia, original daughter of the asshole king and now adoptive daughter to myself, he says, holding her close to him. She blushed and waved to the goddesses. Amaterasu squealed and hugged Talia. She is so cute. She yells, making the other goddesses and Naruto sweat drop. Grandma, please don't suffocate Talia, he says as he pulls her from his grandmother and moves her to his mother. Kaguya smiles at her. Hello Talia, you could say I'm your grandmother, she says, making the punk girl get nervous a bit. Kaguya chuckles and hugs the girl. You are family, do not be nervous, she says, making Talia smile. Okay everybody, come get some cake, but first Naruto needs to blow out the candles, Hestia calls out in her elder form. Naruto chuckles and looks at the candles. He takes a breath and blows out the candles, thinking only one thought. I wish to keep Talia and everyone in my life. The party went on as gifts were given. Amaterasu got him more scrolls and items she stole from the elemental nations which were thriving nicely under Tsunade and Gaara's watch. The villagers were upset at the loss of chakra, but when they were told who took it they felt terrible. Hinata apparently apologized to Tsunade according to the letter that came with his gift and described the reason why she didn't help. Fear of the villagers and her clan elders, which Tsunade completely understood, as did he. Tsunade gave him sake, Shizune gave him hangover cures, and Gaara gave him a gourd of iron sand, all very useful items. His mom gave him a male version of her kimono but in reverse color scheme. He liked it a lot, he could use it for staying hidden and teaming up with Zetsu. Zetsu gave him a scroll on the bone pulse Kekai Genkai, which apparently he had but didn't know how to use. It could be useful, so he'd learn to do it later. Hestia's gift was very sweet. Homemade cookies from the goddess of home and hearth. He took one bite and nearly passed out due to how delicious they were. He immediately sealed them away to keep them all to himself. Maybe he'd share with Talia, but mostly all for him. Something that made Hestia very proud. Then Talia came up with her gift. "Here you go, Dad, I hope you like," she says as she hands him the box and looks down at her feet nervously, which made Amaterasu squeal and nearly hug the girl again. Luckily his mom and Hestia held her back. He opened the box and nearly shed a tear. Inside was a homemade orange scarf. She must have knit this, he thinks as he wraps it around his neck and smiles happily as he hugs his daughter. "I love it, Talia, thank you," he says, making her smile brightly and hug him back. "Welcome, Dad, it's my first time doing something like this. Also," she says, pulling him down to her height and kisses his cheek. "Love you, Dad," she says as she runs to hide behind Hestia, who smiles warmly. He smiled brightly and smiled to her hidden form. "Love you too, Talia," he says as the party continues on, with Talia occasionally being forcefully cuddled by his grandmother. -9 months since the party, 1 year, till the lightning thief. Naruto stood before his daughter with Yamato in his hands and wearing black jeans and black sandals with a white button-up and orange vest. Also around his neck was Tsunade's necklace. He would be wearing Talia's scarf, but it was far too warm, and since they were going to sparing, he didn't want to damage it. Talia had grown in the 9 months. She was now 13 and they had celebrated her birthday in a similar manner to his. Something that made her cry tears of joy. He had gotten her a summoning contract, the Eagle one. She grew her short hair out so it was now down to her shoulders. In each ear was a small black bar, a chakra rod. Only there so Naruto could summon her back to him if he was in range of her, since they were small. She wore the golden trench coat that was actually the Nemean lioness's pelt. She also wore gray skinny jeans and a Green Day band shirt with her leather-studded band on her wrist. Strapped to her waist were the Kiba blades in the sheaths he made for them. Over the 9 months she learned more lightning jutsus than he did, and even a large amount of wind jutsus, some that she learned in secret as he focused on his Hiraishin and keeping her in the house safe. "Okay, you know the rules. I will hold back from using the Shinju's eyes and the cloaked form as well as the orbs. This will be a straight sword fight and jutsu battle," he says, drawing Yamato and holding the sheath in his left hand. She nods and releases the Kiba blades. "Any jutsu restrictions?" she asks as she twirls the blades around, getting ready. He nods. "No Reikiri, and I will not use anything higher than the normal Rasengan," he says, getting a frown from her, but nods once she remembers the power of a strengthened Rasengan or a Rasenshuriken. "Ready?" he asks, getting a nod from her. "Remember, come at me with the intent to kill," he says, getting a shaky nod from her. He smiles and nods. "Go," he yells, getting a burst of speed from her. He immediately blocks strikes from all around. Only thing keeping him from being cut was his hardened senses from battle as a shinobi. "She is a natural at using her swift release," Shinju says with a smirk as Naruto continues to block. Luckily Yamato's sheath was invincible, so using it as a shield was nothing. He continued to block, going to have to do better than just speed Talia. He yells out as he quickly fires chakra from his tenketsu points and starts to spin, Kaden. He yells out, creating a massive spiraling dome around him. sending Taliah skidding back before she was on defense from her father's powerful strikes. Taliah had noticed that while her father held back in their spars, he wasn't finding her weak, he just didn't want to hurt her. He always went to a level he felt she could trump if she truly pushed herself. Hell, that's how she found out she could summon black lightning. It was one of her most powerful techniques to use and even more so to control. Naruto swung his blade before tossing the sheath up shortly before striking her with Hidden Vine, only for her to block it skillfully. He caught the sheath and switched the sheath and sword back to the right hands as he swept under her legs. He was impressed she had blocked that technique, as he found it was difficult since your senses never noticed it before it was too late to block. Taliah jumped over the sweep and ran her hands through the hand seals as she let the blades dangle from the bands she put that were attached to her wrists so she could drop the blades at a moment's notice to use a jutsu and then grab them a second later. Black lightning. Electromagnetic murder. She yells out, creating a ball of dark lightning to fire numerous streams of high-powered streaks of pitch-black lightning at her father. Naruto coded Yamato in wind chakra to negate the lightning element. Wind style. Dividing wind, he yells as he swings his sword, creating a large blade of wind chakra hitting about 2/3 RDS of the streaks. He dodged the few others. His vision was obscured by the dust. He kept his senses alert as he heard a chirping noise he knew all too well. He turned and saw Taliah not too far from him with a Chidori in her hand. Chidori. She yells as she knew he had no time to create a Rasengan. He groaned, and just as the Chidori hit, he substituted with Log. He landed next to her and swung Yamato at her. She quickly grabbed her blades and blocked, but was sent skidding back from the force of the blow. She stabbed the blades in the ground and unstrapped them. "Time to show him what Grandma gave me," she says as her body was covered in electricity. He smiled. "Lightning armor. Great job," he said as he sheathed Yamato and sealed it away. Taliah burst towards him and attacked in a fury of powerful and incredibly fast punches. It had taken her 5 months to get to where she could keep it up in a spar against Zetsu, who helped her keep it hidden from her dad. Naruto blocked the strikes, feeling the power behind them. He used what he remembered of the frog kata to dodge and block her hits, but with her powerful lightning element and swift release it was actually getting difficult at the current level he held himself at. Lightning uppercut. She yells, firing a powerful hit towards his chin. He tries to block it with his hands but still found himself being fired upwards. He smiled, proud of his daughter and how strong she had gotten. He ran his hands through the seals and clapped his hands. Wind style. Great breakthrough, he calls out, sending Taliah skidding backwards as the gust hit her hard. Naruto landed, wiping the blood from her mouth, and clapped. "Great job, Taliah. You pass. You did amazing," he said, making the girl smile brightly as she ran towards him. She jumped into his arms and hugged him tightly. "Thank you, Dad. I never would have gotten like this if not for you," she says with a smile. He hugs her back and smiles. "Your control over black lightning is great. Also, using the lightning armor of the Raikages is amazing, and that Chidori was greatly done," he says, making her smile more. "Thanks, Dad. What was that spinning dome thing?" she asks as she sheaths her blades back and smiles. "That was a memorial to a friend of mine I lost in war. His name was Neji Hyuga, and that was his clan's ultimate defense," he said as he looked up into the sky as if to remember him. Taliah nodded. "I'm sorry for bringing up bad memories," she says, only to get a chuckle from him. "Remembering the lost isn't a bad memory. It helps keep them warm in our hearts. Only when you lose sleep over them is it bad, as they most likely wouldn't want you to do that over them," he says as he heads inside with her not far behind. "Can you maybe tell me stories of your life in your original realm? Maybe we can visit there," she asks, curious. He ruffled her hair playfully as he always did. "Sure, I don't mind telling you some stories, but we can't visit right now. Maybe later," he says, getting a nod from her after she swatted his hand away like she always did. She didn't hate him ruffling her hair, but it made her feel like a little kid. But she put up with it 'cause it was from her dad and he did it as a sign of affection. He summons some drinks for them as he sat in front of the fireplace. He started around the time of him graduating after defeating Mizuki with his armies of clones. He told her of his first mission outside the village and the encounter with Haku and what he learned from the girl An. In my mind Haku will always be a female. He also mentioned the Chunin exams and how he defeated Gaara and befriended him. He bitterly told her of Sasuke's betrayal and how he fought him at the Valley of End. He even showed her the scar. "Why did you teach me a move that hurt you so bad?" she asks with slight tears in her eyes. She almost hit him with the same technique that nearly killed him. He pet her head and smiled. "Talia, I taught that to you as I felt you could use it as Sasuke could not, to protect people and not in revenge. You are nothing like Sasuke. Hell, if anything you are more like me when I was your age," he said chuckling as she smiled, then swatted his arm away like she always did. He got back to telling his stories as he found Talia very interested. He told her of his training trip to going 4 tails and fighting Orochimaru. He told her of his learning of Sage Mode under the toads, which confused her. "Wait, I've never seen you summon toads, just foxes, wolves, slugs and hawks," she says confused. Why did her father summon toads anymore if they were that powerful? He sighed and took a sip of the tea he made. "Something happened and they ended up leaving me hanging out to dry. They could have prevented something from happening but chose to abandon me, but forget about that as it will make sense later," he said, getting a nod from her. He went back to telling her of Pain's invasion and him getting Kurama's power under control in the beginning of the 4th Great Ninja War. "Wait, you fought against Grandma?" she asks shocked. Her grandmother seemed so peaceful. He shook his head and explained to her the same way Shinju explained to him, which made her release a breath of relief as he got to telling her the end of the war and what happened after. "And then I came here and saved you. That's about everything," he says as he rubs the back of his neck, trying to think if he forgot anything. Talia frowned. "Those villagers are assholes as are those toads," she says, getting a bop on her head. "What did I tell you about cursing?" he says in his father tone, as Zetsu liked to call it. She grumbles. "I can only curse if it's directed towards Zeus," she says, rubbing her head. He smiles and nods. "Exactly. Now enough story time, I believe it is getting near your bedtime," he said, making her groan and look at him. "I'm 13. I shouldn't have a bedtime," she says as she pouts at him. She had been training with deadly swords and deadly techniques yet still had a bedtime. He pats her on the head. "It is so you get rest as your body is still growing and needs rest to grow," he says, directing her to her room. She sighs and hugs him. "Good night." "Night, Dad," she says as she leaves. "Night, Talia. Sleep tight," he says after he hugs her back and heads off to his room. -2 months later, 10 months, till Lightning Thief. Over the next few months Naruto sent out clones with markers to test his distance and to mark certain places such as Talia's tree and the Empire State Building. He found warping long distances wasn't difficult, it just took some more energy, but with Shinju and his already insane reserves it was of no worry. He was working on Hiraishin's second step where he would warp to mid-air and found that more difficult as it wasn't connected to anything. But that's when it hit him. It was connected to the air and the nature energy flowing in it. It took him roughly a month or 2 to get the second step mastered. He sat in front of Talia, who was excited as laid before him was a summoning contract. Not just any contract, it was the Eagle contract. The one he found for her and gifted her for her birthday. She had signed it then, but he told her to wait until she was much stronger, as sometimes the summons will have the summoner fight for the right to summon them. "Okay, Talia, remember, treat them with respect as they aren't fond of your father, as he claims the eagles as his animal when he holds no attributes of them. Such as equality and humbleness, since he thinks he's always the best and hasn't been fair since very long ago," he says, grumbling. Talia nods. "Of course, Dad. I'm ready," she says with a smile. He nods and motions her to go. She takes a deep breath and runs through the hand signs, summoning jutsu. She calls out, slamming her hands to the ground, enveloping the clearing in a large plume of smoke. "Who has summoned me?" She hears a deep voice call out as huge bronze wings clear the smoke to reveal a huge eagle with dark green eyes and a golden beak. It looked around until it stared down at Talia. "Ah, Talia Otsutsuki," it said with a smile in its voice. Talia signed with his last name as he officially adopted her shortly after she called him dad for the first time. She nods. "I would like permission to be your summoner," she says, bowing to the huge beast. The eagle laughs. "Oh, I am glad you are nothing like your original father. We the Eagle clan have heard of your progress from our brothers, the Hawks, and we would be proud to have you as a summoner and even our sage when the time comes," he says, nodding. Talia smiles brightly and bows again. "Thank you, boss summon of the Eagles," she says in a respectful tone. The eagle looks at her. "My name is Mashidiro," it says before dispelling. Talia smiled brightly and turned to her dad. "They accepted me." She yells in excitement. "But they didn't have me do anything," she says, confused as to why. He smiled and ruffled her hair. "Most likely cause they trust you from hearing from you from the Hawks. Also, eagles are very empathic. Most animals are, so they most likely felt no ill emotions that would mess with them," he says, getting his hand swatted away. "And if they are considering making you their sage, which is a great honor for any summon to do. I was originally the Toad's sage and now I'm the Slug's first ever sage," he says in a proud tone, making her smile even more. "In a few months you might even go to their realm and learn," he said, patting her back. She smiles. "Will you be able to come?" she asks, nervous. He smiles somewhat sad and shakes his head. "I am not a summoner of them and you have to go through it alone, but Zetsu will go with you to watch over you and relay messages," he said, hugging her. She frowns but nods, hugging her father back. "Well, not like I'm going right now, but we can still train and be together. Till I have to go and I will return afterwards," she said, smiling up to her dad. He nods. "True, but if you complete it you will be the youngest sage, beating me by 3 or so years," he says as stands up and smiles at her. "Let's rest for a bit and relax. We've been training really hard as of late," he says, getting a nod from her. I use time skips to skip menial training that will have no importance." Long story short, Talia learns to fight with her summons and use more lightning and wind jutsus and more control over black lightning. Naruto focuses on creating seals and training his daughter. -4 months later, 6 more, till Lightning Thief. Another year had passed before any of them realized. Naruto's party was small, just him and Talia. He was given a bunch of gifts from his friends and family members again, and a silver skull ring and necklace from Talia that he wore at all times. He stood hugging his daughter as she was finally ready to go under sage training. He spent the majority of the time training her to get to a level where sage mode wouldn't be too difficult, but since she had his hyperactive personality when he was young, it might be difficult. Also, he hoped she wouldn't be gone for her birthday that was in 2 months, but either way Zetsu had his gift for her since he would be going with her. "Stay safe and listen to your teachers. Even if they smack you with sticks or anything, as it is to get the nature energy out of you so you don't turn to stone," he says as he fastens her scroll on her with her Nemean lioness pelt on her as always. Her leather band was around her wrist and Zetsu was in her sleeve. She nods and holds her dad's hand. "What are you gonna do while I'm gone?" she asks, making Naruto scratch his chin, thinking. "I might travel around. Maybe fight some monsters or something. Maybe go and see how that backwards camp is holding up," he said, getting a nod from her. "Stay safe, Dad." She hugs him one last time. "Love you," she says as her father hugs her back. This was the first time she was leaving him for an extended point of time. She was worried, but he helped ease her worries. "I will be fine, you do the same. I love you too, Talia," he says as he lets go of her to see her disappear with the eagle she summoned. He frowned and sighed. "You miss her already," he heard Hestia say from behind him. She stood in her elder form with her hood down, letting her cinnamon hair flow out. He nodded. "I've been with her for nearly 2 years. She's grown on me and became my adopted daughter. How can I not miss her?" he said as he rubbed the skull ring on his finger. "Well, do be safe when you travel. What are you going to do about the house?" she asks as he heads back inside. I am going to set up countermeasures and leave a strengthened clone behind, he says, laying the crescent mark on Talia's door, creating an intricate array on it. If the house is about to be destroyed or robbed, all of Talia's things will go to my Kamui pocket dimension. He then went over and strapped his scroll to his waist. It'll be fine, Hestia, though I do hope nothing happens to it, he says with a frown. Hestia nods. I will look after it as well, she says as Naruto hands her a weird 3-pronged knife. Stab that in the ground if you need me. It's a marker for a teleportation technique of mine, he said as he focused on a certain marker he set up near the camp. Hestia nodded and smiled. Thank you, enjoy your travels, she says as he disappears in an orange flash. New York. Naruto frowned as he arrived in New York as the first thing he noticed was the weather. It was storming and the tides were crazy. Stupid asshole must be angry about one thing or another, he thinks as he walks through the city. He wore dark jeans with his black sandals. He also wore a black button-up with an orange jacket as it was winter. Around his neck was Talia's scarf she made for him and the skull necklace. Tsunade's necklace was gone as he gave it to Zetsu to give it to Talia. He knew the girl knew of its importance and he hoped she liked it. He walked through town noticing some females looking at him and groaned. It reminded him of how Aphrodite had offered her services to him at the meeting so long ago. He continued walking, ignoring the stares he got as he hid away in the closest store to him. He looked around to see himself in a candy store called Sweet on America. He walked around until he noticed one worker being yelled at by a customer. He got closer so he could overhear and possibly help her. The female had light blue eyes and wavy brown hair. She was in her uniform and looked around her very early 30s. Look, Gabe, we don't have enough money for you to spend tuning up your engine in your car, the woman says with a frown. The male, who looked like a mix between a walrus and a seal combined. He was disgusting to say the least. Yeah, 'cause we spend all our money sending your idiotic son to a boarding school. We could always just take him out as he will only get kicked out again, the man he figured to be Gabe said in a snide tone. The woman sighs. Fine, just use the money from my savings, she says in defeat. The man smirks and pats her cheek. Good girl, Sally, I'll buy it all while you are at work, he says in a smug tone as he leaves the store. Sally frowns until she hears someone clear their throat. She turned around and blushed slightly. The man was a few years younger than she was. He had spiky vibrant blonde hair with 2 spiky bangs framing his face with the rest of it in a ponytail and the clearest sapphire blue eyes she had ever seen and 3 whisker-like marks on each cheek. Oh, sorry customer, what can I help you with? She asks, erasing her blush. He chuckled. Well, I am looking for some orange candy, but I couldn't help but overhear the conversation. Sorry for eavesdropping, but that man is disgusting. Why is a beautiful woman like yourself with a man like that? It's obviously not for his personality, he says, ending in a flat tone. She blushes at being called beautiful and chuckles at his tone but frowns. Sadly, it is for my son, she says as she gets a better look at him. I'm Sally Jackson, and you are? She asks in a kind tone. Naruto rubs the back of his head. Well, that is very strong of you. My name is Naruto Otsutsuki, though I have to ask why a mortal is blessed by Poseidon. He asks, shocking her, nearly making her fall over. Luckily he caught her. He noticed Poseidon's blessing as he looked her over with the Shinju's eyes. The blessing looked like an aura of blue in the form of a crown made of what looked to be coral. How do you know of that? She asks in a whisper as she straightened herself. She had never met another mortal that could see through the mist like she could, and how could he see Poseidon's blessing? She never heard of anyone doing that before. Naruto chuckled. Well, I myself am a demigod and I can sense auras easily, he explains as he picks up a bag of jelly beans. We can always talk more maybe after your work, as I think I can help keep your kid safe and keep you from having to stay with that vile man, he said as she nodded and rang him up. I get off at 7, though I am curious of how you survived so long, she says as she hands him the receipt. He smiled and took the receipt. Well, I am a bit special, I'll explain more after you get off work, he says as he leaves the store. He really didn't like the way that man treated her. Now he isn't like Artemis, he just happens to hate this one man for how he acted. He thought up a plan to help her out a bit. He summoned a clone and smiled at it. You know what to do, he says as the clone nods and body flickers away. He wasn't going to kill that man just yet, he first needed to give her the suppression tag he created. He made it long ago when he and Talia were first traveling together. It would suppress their aura but not their abilities, so it was more a camouflage tag. He waited around until 7 rolled around. He waited out front as Sally walked out still in uniform but was wearing a jacket. Ready? She asks. He nods and they walk. So who is your godly parent? She asks as they cross the street. Chaos. Technically I'm a demi-primordial but not that it really matters, he says, shocking her more so. See, Chaos, the primordial of creation, is your mother. She says in shock. You must be powerful, she says, looking him over. He shrugs his shoulders. I don't care about being strong as long as I can protect my daughter. I adopted her over 2 years ago. She is busy at the moment, so I'm all alone at the moment. While we traveled I developed something to hide her aura and keep her powers, he says, pulling out a tag with the seal on it. Sally looks it over confused. How is paper supposed to help my son? She asks as she runs her finger over the markings. It uses energy that this realm hasn't seen in eons. It will work, trust me, he says, flashing her a kind smile that made her blush as she slipped the paper away. So now you can leave that vile man if you wish, he said, giving her a thumbs up. She chuckled but frowned, somewhat afraid of how Gabe would react. He's never laid a hand on her per se, but he wasn't nonviolent. He would threaten her son. Even if I did I wouldn't be able to support myself, she says with a frown. Gabe paid for most of the expenses since he was a manager at an electronics store. Well, good thing you are being promoted, he said, brandishing a huge smile. Sally stared at him confused. What do you mean? I'm not getting promoted, she says in a wary tone. He flips open his phone and dials a number. Yes, did the deal go through? He asks to the person on the other end. Great and not too bad on the cost. Be sure to promote Sally, he said, giving the confused brunette a thumbs up. Okay, thanks, bye, he said, closing the phone. He turns to Sally. Well, you are looking at the new owner of Sweet on America and you are the new manager. Better pay and free candy, he said with a smile, shocking her even more. You bought the little store. Why? Or better yet, how? She asked. Whoever this man was, he was powerful. He nodded his head. Yeah, why not? It's a cute little store and I wanted to help you. You get crap pay and I feel now you can relax more. And I used the pay from my godfather's books that I republished, so it was no big deal, he said, waving it off as they continued walking. Now you don't have to worry about financing, he said in a carefree tone, flashing her a fox-like grin. She smiles but still feels nervous of doing it. She fears of Gabe hurting his son or seeking her son out. Another thing you should know is I'm empathic. I can feel your fear, he said in a solemn tone with a frown, making her frown and look to her feet. I can take care of him, Sally. He is pure trash and you know it. I won't make it messy. You deserve your freedom, he said, shocking her. Could she really ask him to do this, a demigod she just met not hours ago? She took a shaky breath and nodded. Please don't make him suffer, she said in a quiet tone. He smiled and chuckled. You are too good of a woman, Sally, he said, smiling to her as they continued to walk towards her apartment. When they got there, Naruto turned to Sally. Wait out here until I return. By the time I return he will be gone and so shall all his trash. You can keep the car, he said, chuckling as Sally nodded and gave him the key. He kept his smile until he closed the door behind him, and it turned to a frown as he saw the mess of an apartment before him. He activated his eyes and looked around. Are you really going to help her out? Shinju asks as he had been silent the entire time, watching to see his grandson's reasoning for doing all this. She is such a pure-hearted woman, She sacrifices everything for her son and is terrified of her spouse. She deserves to be free. Will you help me with the human path? He asked in a serious tone. Of course, let's deliver him to Hades, Shinju says with a fanged smile. Naruto smirks and walks into the house. Oi Sally, get your in here, I need you to unlock the damn safe so I can get your checking book from it, he hears Gabe yell from the other room. Naruto grows a massive smirk. Let's put on a show, he thinks as he puts on a henge of the Shinigami of his realm. He slowly walks to the room and infuses his voice with Shinju's menacing voice. Gabe Ugliano, you have been found guilty of being a terrible human being, he says, making the seal man jump and scurry back in fear. The man was shaking in fear, and no, I can't be dying. Take Sally instead, he yells, making Naruto scowl in hatred. You are a terrible person. After this day no one will ever remember your horrid life, he says, placing his finger on the man's shaking forehead. Human path. Soul removal, he says, tearing Gabe's soul from his body in one fell swoop. He drops the soul to the ground, letting it fade away to the underworld. He glared in disgust as he stared down at the man's dead body as he dropped his henge. This man, while he was at death's doors, offered up his wife, trying to get out of death. He stared at the man's body and drew Tenno from his seal. Amaterasu, he calls out, burning the body alone and destroying the ashes as well. He summons 2 clones. Go destroy anything of his and leave anything of value for Sally, he said, getting nods from the clones as they hurry to get to work. As he walks to the door he notices pictures of Sally with a small boy. He had dark black hair with sea green eyes. Must be her son, he thinks as he exits the house. He smiles at Sally. All good, he says, getting her attention. She looked at him and nodded as she headed inside with him behind. She cried tears of joy seeing everything of Gabe's gone and no sign that he was even there. Thank you, Naruto. I don't know how I could ever thank you. In one day you have helped me so much, she says, smiling at him. He smiled. It is fine, Sally, I'd like to give you this as well, he says, handing her a credit card and a slip of paper. The first is an account set up to help you and the next is my number if you ever need me, he said, placing a tag version of the Hiraishin seal on her wall for it to burn into it and disappear. She frowned. I can't accept this card, she said, trying to hand it back to him only for him to deny it. You don't even need to use it. Just have it in case you ever need it. It has a fraction of my total account on it and will get periodical payments deposited into it, he said, flashing her a warm smile. He turns around. Well, I ought to be going. I need to find a hotel or something to stay in for the time I am staying in New York, he said, heading for the door. Wait, he hears Sally yell out. He turns to see her standing nervously. You can stay here on the pull-out couch if you want. I'd offer you my son's room, but he is returning for winter break soon, she says, nervous, with a slight blush. He smiles and bows. Thank you very much, Sally. Are you sure? I don't wish to inconvenience you by staying here, he says, getting a chuckle from Sally. You have done too much for me. If anything, I am the inconvenience. My son is 11, so it is no worries, she says, getting a nod from him. Fine, but I cook if I am being your guest, he says, getting a smile from Sally. As long as you cook your food blue for my son, she says, confusing him a bit. He shrugged his shoulders. Must be an inside family thing, he thinks as he pulls out the bed. He turns to Sally. Well, I will see you in the morning, Sally. Good night, he says with a smile that made her blush slightly. She nodded and headed off to bed. Tomorrow, Naruto woke up slightly after Sally as she had to leave to pick up her son. He spent a morning cleaning the house with clones as he created blue food for them. He heard Sally drive up to the house as he set the food down at the table. Moments later, a little kid burst into the house and looked at him confused. Who are you? The boy asks very bluntly as the kid looked at in confusion. He chuckled as he felt he would start to like this kid after some time.